When you think of the Roman Empire, what comes to mind? Legions, right? Emperors and togas. But what if I told you their real power, the secret sauce to conquering and controlling half the known world, was engineering? Unrivaled, game-changing engineering.
I mean, listen to this quote. It just perfectly captures their whole attitude. Rome can go anywhere. There's nothing going to hold Rome back. That's not just some empty boast, you know? For the Romans, that was basically their mission statement for their engineers.
All right, to really get this, let's start with a number. Just one number. 10. What on earth could happen in just 10 days that could help define an entire empire? Any guesses? Well, 10. That's how many days it took Julius Caesar to build a bridge across the Rhine River, a river everyone thought was completely uncrossable. And get this wasn't just about getting troops from one side to the other. Oh no, this was a psychological weapon. It terrified a massive army of over 400,000 soldiers into submission, pretty much without a fight. And right here, this is where the legend of Roman engineering really kicks off. So that brings us to our first big idea, the blueprint for conquest. How in the world did they do it? How did the Romans keep pulling off these engineering feats that just seemed impossible to everybody else at the time? Okay, so let's break down that Rhine bridge from 55 BC. It was absolute genius. Caesar's guys drove these huge timber piles into the riverbed, but not straight down, at an angle. And here's the brilliant part. They used the river's own current to make the bridge stronger. The piles facing upstream were braced by the current, and the ones downstream pushed against it. It created this super stable, locked-in foundation. Slap some 2-foot-thick beams across, lay down a road surface, and boom, a bridge, in 10 days. It was just unbelievably fast and strong. But that bridge, that was just the tip of the iceberg. The whole Roman expansion was really powered by a kind of holy trinity of secret weapons. First, you had the roads, a 50,000-mile network that let them move armies and supplies at terrifying speeds. Then there was their waterproof concrete, a special mix with volcanic sand that could literally set underwater. Crazy, right? But the true foundation, the thing that made so much else possible, was one elegant, simple, revolutionary idea. And that was the arch. I know, it sounds simple, but it was a complete game changer. You got this curved structure, and that one stone right at the top, the keystone, it locks everything together. All the weight gets pushed down and outwards, not straight down. What does that mean? It means you can build bigger, wider, and stronger than ever before, and you use way less material doing it. This little shape was literally the backbone of the Roman Empire. Which leads us right into our next chapter, building for the people. Because once the empire reached its peak, all that engineering genius wasn't just for conquering anymore. It became a tool for controlling and managing a huge, and I mean huge, population.
Okay, another number for you. 200 million. Just let that sink in for a second. 200 million. That's how many gallons of fresh water the aqueducts brought into the city of Rome every single day. And what are aqueducts? Well, they're basically just long lines of arches. This system gave 1 million people running water, which meant they had public baths, fountains, sanitation, stuff that was completely unheard of anywhere else in the ancient world. It was a powerful message, right? We're not just conquerors. We're cleaner, healthier, and just plain better than you. But what you built with that engineering power, well, that said a lot about you as an emperor. It's kind of like a tale of two visions. You have Emperor Vespasian, a no-nonsense general. He takes a private lake built by his predecessor and drains it to build a massive public arena. Then you have Emperor Nero, a total tyrant. He takes public land that burned down in a fire and uses it to build a ridiculously over-the-top private palace for himself. See the difference? Engineering for the people versus engineering for the ego. In Vespasian's project, the Colosseum, was basically a super stadium from the future. It held 70,000 people, and it had things we think of as modern, 110 drinking fountains, actual restrooms, and even a retractable canvas roof to provide shade. But the real magic was hidden underneath. It was called the hypogeum, a 2-story underground labyrinth of elevators and trapdoors. They could launch gladiators, scenery, and even wild animals up into the arena out of nowhere. It was all about creating the ultimate, shocking spectacle for the masses. And this obsession with spectacle leads us perfectly into our next section, monuments to imperial ego. Because that line between building for the public and building for personal glories started to get really, really blurry. Engineering became less about the state and more about the ruler's personal vanity. And who's the poster child for imperial ego? Emperor Nero, of course. After that huge fire in Rome, he built himself this insane 200-acre palace complex called the Golden House. And when it's finished, he says, and you gotta hear this, "Finally, I can begin to live in a house worthy of a human being." I mean, the arrogance is just off the charts.
But hey, Nero wasn't the only emperor with a massive ego and a passion for building. Take Hadrian. He was a really hands-on architect, but maybe a little sensitive. There's this story that a rival architect made fun of his designs, telling him to go play with his pumpkin domes. Well, you know what? Hadrian did exactly that, and he ended up creating one of the most breathtaking buildings ever made, the Pantheon.
So how on earth did they pull this off? We're talking about a 150-foot wide concrete dome with no visible supports inside. And it stayed the largest unsupported concrete dome in the world for 1,800 years. It all came down to a bunch of brilliant engineering hacks to reduce the weight. They started with super thick 20-foot foundation walls. As they built the dome upwards, they started mixing lighter stuff into the concrete, like pumice stone or even hollow clay jugs. They carved out those beautiful recessed squares in the ceiling called coffers, which also removed a ton of weight. And the final genius move? They just left a giant 30-foot hole at the very top, the oculus. No weight at the dome's weakest point. Absolutely incredible.
But this golden age of incredible ego-fueled masterpieces, it couldn't last. All empires eventually face a reckoning, and that brings us to our final dramatic act, the fall of an empire. You could say the last great gasp of Roman engineering grandeur was the Baths of Caracalla. This place was a massive, luxurious leisure complex that could host thousands of people at once, an absolute masterpiece. But it was built by a monster, a tyrant, who had his own brother murdered so he could take the throne. It's kind of symbolic, isn't it? This stunningly beautiful structure built on a foundation of pure cruelty. And after that, things started to fall apart. And it happened fast. In 217 AD, Caracalla himself is assassinated by his own guards. In the very same year, a massive fire guts the Colosseum. But the real death blow, the one the city couldn't recover from, came a few centuries later. In 537 AD, invading armies did the one thing that would kill Rome for good. They cut the aqueducts. They cut off the city's water supply, its very lifeline.
The effect was absolutely catastrophic. Think about this. In just a couple of centuries, the population of Rome crashed from over 1 million people down to about 12,000. That's a 99% drop. It's almost unbelievable. Without the engineering that made it possible, the great city of Rome just withered and died.
So when you look back at this incredible story of rise and fall, what's the big lesson here? I think it's that the Romans showed us something really profound, that the very same ambition that drives incredible progress
Can also be the thing that engineers our own destruction. Their greatest triumphs and their ultimate collapse came from the exact same place. This relentless drive, this ego, this thirst for more. Which really leaves us with a pretty heavy question to think about for our own time, doesn't it? What is the true cost of our own ambition?